thing I love most about Gloria's playing is that it's intensely lyrical. Her phrasing to me feels liquid, literally as if there's no division between the keys when she moves up and down the keyboard, and yet it's also incredibly powerful and rhythmically really strong, at times really gut-wrenching. My first thoughts with any concerto are always who is the soloist. What's the dramatic intention behind the solo part? And how is that going to be manifest in the kind of writing that I do for the solo part? If it's extremely virtuosic or if it's more restrained and lyrical. How do those things relate to the conversation that the soloist is having with the orchestra? I can't get very far until I've sorted that out. The piece started to take on this kind of dual aspect, a very dreamlike and limpid quality contrasted with a much more forceful, at times aggressive quality. Gloria and I have been friends and have worked together now for coming up on 30 years. Over that time, she has commissioned 2 other large-scale pieces for me, and then also premiered another piece that I'd written just as a sort of compositional etude for myself that she picked up and performed quite a lot. And so a big part of our friendship has been making music together, and then it's also been my exploring piano writing and getting deeper into the instrument and becoming more and more comfortable with the instrument. And so we had reached the point where we felt like it was time for a concerto. She reached out and I reached out, and immediately Julia Tai and the Seattle Modern Orchestra jumped on board, and the whole project then was really defined by that relationship. And that meant that it was going to be work for piano and chamber orchestra instead of huge romantic orchestra, and I liked that a lot because that really dovetailed nicely with how I was hearing the piece at that point. Once I got into it, after a pretty long stretch, the better part of a year actually, where I was just sketching and jotting down ideas and thinking about different timbral combinations. Once all that began to coalesce, the piece came pretty quickly. And what I realized about midway through it was that it was becoming something of a diary piece. I hadn't started out with that intention, that the only extra musical thing that sort of kicked the thing in motion was the Red Book of Carl Jung, his own private collection of dreams and fantasies and obsessions that was just published a few years ago. And I'd been hearing a lot of music as I was pouring through that, and so the first movement comes directly out of that. But that then led directly into 2 other movements that are also quite personal, and that sort of have this trajectory from dream life through a movement that for me is all about exploring compassion and the challenges of compassion and of living in a way that is marked by compassion, through a last movement that is called Quantum Memoir, which for me suggests a whole life history that is somehow inscribed in these very small bits of information. And so the movement has a kind of a bubbly, pulsy sort of quantum feel to it. Midway through writing that movement, we lost Stephen Stuckey, a dear, dear friend, one of my most important mentors, and easily one of the most significant composers of the last generation in this country or anywhere else. And that was a pretty shattering loss for everybody. And he somehow crept into that last movement in ways that are actually not all that easy to quantify, no pun intended, but that for me are very, very strong. And so that movement is titled Quantum Memoir 2SS. The piece grows directly out of my relationship with Gloria. Another relationship that's really important to me is with Julia Tai, the conductor of the group. This is the second concerto of mine that she'll have premiered, and she's somebody who has an incredible knack for rendering contemporary music, and often the most complex of contemporary music, in a way that is technically spot on and at the same time musically and expressively deep. The group that she co-founded with Jeremy Joly, who's also a wonderful composer, is made up of among the best players in Seattle, and every year they give an entire season that is incredibly diverse and rich and unafraid of taking contemporary music that is at times thorny, at other times quite rhythmically challenging, and bringing it to an audience in such a way that people absolutely love it. And so the piece is going to be in really good hands.